I'm pleased to have with us once again Mr. Joe Corrao. Joe and I have worked together in the past on projects dealing with general aviation security, and his article this month examines why airline security does not work in a general aviation environment. And true to form, he not only presents the problem, but he also walks us down a clear path toward the practical solutions. Joe, welcome back.
Thank you, Dave. It's a pleasure to join you again.
Joe, I really liked your article this month. It seems that you've coined a new term for general aviation security, operational access. Could you explain to us your concept of operational access and how that is a better method of security than the airline and TSA version of checkpoint security?
Happy to, Dave. The concept of operational access recognizes that for anti-terror purposes, it may be okay if somebody can touch your airplane without authorization, as long as they're not able to use it. The concept of operational access focuses on the terrorist's need to use the airplane for some purpose. Now, you asked about the comparison between airline security and general aviation security. As my article outlines, one of the major differences is that airline operations are scheduled, and security personnel then can know and do know well in advance approximately when the people are going to arrive, where they're going to arrive, when they're going to depart, and where they're going to go. And so it's relatively simple in the airline context to set up a security measure where people and their cargo and their luggage converge, which is what TSA calls a checkpoint. In the general aviation environment, that's not so easy, because general aviation goes where it wants to, when it wants to, and takes the route it wants to take. There are no points of coalescence that are known in advance.
Joe, one of the other things I really liked about your article is how you clearly differentiated between scheduled passenger and cargo commercial air service and general aviation. One of the common challenges I see is the application of security across the broad spectrum of the different types of flying done in general aviation. For example, the corporation with one or more business jets is less likely to be impacted by the costs for implementing a security program. However, the private owner and operator of, let's say, a Cessna Skyhawk or a Piper Dakota is more likely to feel that the costs associated with almost any regulated security program are too high. How does your approach, this operational access, meet the security needs of these very different types of general aviation?
Well, David, your question hits on a key point, and that is that the concept of general aviation embraces a large variety of very diverse business models. When we talk about general aviation, we're talking about so many business models and such a diverse range of activities that we really need to get down to a much more precise vocabulary. In your second issue, I wrote an article about a precise vocabulary that enables us to get down below the level of the label general aviation and talk specifically about the characteristics of the aviation that we're trying to secure in a way that is consistent with the range and diversity of aviation business models. So I would encourage readers to take a look at your second issue if they want to know more about a vocabulary that, in my opinion anyway, gives us the precision that we need to write regulations or create procedures or at least speak intelligently in meetings about general aviation security in a way that is much more meaningful and precise and consistent with business models than simply using the label general aviation.
You know, Joe, I like the fact that you're talking about a business model of having the federal government create a cost-effective business case, which I found in your article, for improving general aviation security by encouraging airplane insurers to reduce their insurance premiums for airplane owners who implement the elements of security that you suggested. What's your vision on how this could work?
Well, thanks, Dave, for bringing that up. In my article, I suggested that there might be a role for the federal government to play in terms of facilitating a greater focused, more clear message from the aviation insurance community to the aircraft owner and operator community about the value of security that is consistent with the various business models that the insurers are very well aware of, because they have to estimate the risk associated with those activities, so they have to know the activities very well, and so they have good relationships with their owners and operators typically. It's my understanding that many aviation insurance companies, as an aircraft owner, this is my experience also, it's not just an academic thing. I own an airplane that I have to write a check for every year, and I have observed that there are insurance companies out there that give me credit for certain safety-enhancing behaviors. When I do something that enhances my safety, my insurance company takes note and lowers my premium, or some of them do. The ones I use lower my premium because of that. And the reason they do that is because when I enhance my safety, when I take steps to enhance my safety, I am also lowering their risk. In my article, I talk about how one way to limit operational access to an aircraft is by simply placing it in a hangar. So for those pilots who are sort of on the fence about, do I leave my airplane outside or do I put it in a hangar, know that putting it in a hangar reduces not only the risk that a terrorist will have operational access to your aircraft, which of course you don't want, but also that an opportunistic criminal will have access to your aircraft for purposes of theft or vandalism. So I think that there's a role for the federal government to play in working together with the insurance community, the aviation insurance community, to more clearly and completely present this message to the owner and operator community and encourage owner and operators through the means of their policy premium to undertake some of these very simple but very effective security measures. I mentioned in my article also that the alternatives, which we have tended to chase up to this point, of simply discouraging access, won't achieve the same level of discouragement to unauthorized use and tend to be more expensive. The things we typically do, which is to say we typically fence off an entire airport or an entire ramp area and say, okay, to physically get into the same space as these airplanes, to get into the ramp area, you're going to have to pass through this gate, which is surrounded by this fence, which means you're going to have a badge, which means you're going to have a badge reader, which means there's going to have to be a guard at some point to assure that the badge reader is working properly, and because there's a fence, there's going to have to be a roving patrol by guards of the fence. All that cost really doesn't achieve a security that is, in my opinion, as effective as the combination of a cabin lock, a prop lock, and a throttle lock.
You know, Joe, in my line of work, I remind folks in the airport management business that they're not in the real estate denial business per se, but more in the asset denial when it comes to an airplane. So if the bad guy hops the fence, nothing bad other than trespassing has happened. There's been no threat against other people up to this point, but as they get closer and closer to the asset, there's a greater expectation that they're going to have some negative behavior that they're going to do either to the airplane or with the airplane. The more I think that folks focus on protecting the asset as opposed to denying access to the real estate, they'll probably realize more cost reductions in their security approach.
I couldn't agree more, Dave. And I think your concept of asset protection and the concept of operational access pretty much go hand in hand, don't they? The asset, from the terrorist's point of view, is the utility of the aircraft. The terrorist doesn't really care, and probably the thief doesn't really care, specifically what airplane they take. There may be parameters like must be able to lift X number of pounds, or must be able to accommodate X number of passengers, or for some criminals must hold X number of bales. So there might be a sort of general preference among some of those folks, some of those criminal folks, and perhaps some of the terrorists, for a larger rather than a smaller plane. But for many purposes, a small plane will do just fine, even within the bucket small plane, big plane. Which plane really doesn't matter. So the asset that the terrorist is after is not your airplane, it is an airplane. So the asset really is the use of the airplane. And your concept that focuses on asset protection, rather than protect the airport, focus on the asset, which from the owner's and operator's point of view is the airplane, and from my point of view is the use to which an airplane can be put.
Joe, this is terrific having you here for the interview and sharing your thoughts and giving us the personal insight into your articles. And you've contributed so often to the magazine, and I just want to let you know it's appreciated, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. It's always a pleasure and a great honor.